Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Chris, and in this video, I'm going to introduce you to Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, which is an ERP software predominantly intended for small businesses. And this video in particular is meant for either brand new users who have never dealt with the software before, or for business owners who are contemplating transitioning onto the software. Now, I could talk a lot about Business Central and various aspects of it, but I'm going to leave my summary and analysis to the end of the video, and instead, let's dive straight into the software. So let's get into this. All right, so here we are in a demo account for Business Central. I'll talk about demo accounts in a little bit, but first off, just take a look at what we're seeing here. This is referred to as the Role Center, which is the very first page you come across. You might also think of it as the home page, the dashboard. I often think of it and refer to it as the home base. And before I really start laying out all the things that we're seeing here, what's really important to understand is that when you're accessing Business Central, you're going to do so through a role. And that role is going to dictate how you see and what kinds of things you see on this role center. So a role, if you're not already familiar with it, the concept is it's just like your job title, but for the system. And in some cases, you'll have the exact same role title that is your job title. Let's say you're the controller for your company. Your role in the system might be a controller. And basically what the role will do is it will provide you not only a tailored role center and some other things in the system, it also dictates what your access and the permissions that you have in the system. In other words, what kinds of records can you influence, what kind of reports can you see, etc. That is all contained within the concept of a role. Now, a little bit later, I will show you where is the role. Like in this case, I am in the business manager role. So I'll show you how you can see that as well as how you can change roles. But for now, just understand we are in a particular role for this demo account. And because of that, all kinds of things that we can see here, like the tabs that we see on top, the various statistics we see lower down, all of these things are tailored to the fact that we are in a business manager role. And I will show you switching roles a little later and how that can dramatically change the things that you see here. So now that you have that general concept in mind, let's start taking a look at what we are seeing here in our role center. And this giant banner in front is not particularly helpful. It's mainly just because I'm in a demo account. It's basically saying hello. So I'm going to close that. And I want to break down this role center piece by piece. There's really three main sections of it. And so I want to break them down piece by piece so you can kind of understand the general concept of what you're going to see here and what you're going to see when you first log into Business Central. So first off, we have this header section, basically everything from this light blue-green bar, everything up. This is, in my opinion, this is not the official title, but this is kind of the navigation section of your role center. This is where you have the ability to either do certain actions or dive deeper into the system. So let's break this down piece by piece. If we start up at the top left, Kronos USA, that is what you see there, that hyperlinked field, that is going to be your company name is going to be listed out. So because we're in this demo account, the demo account is called Kronos USA. It is a fake, basically like an IKEA company where they sell tables, chairs, lamps, some basic things like that. And again, it's called Kronos USA. If you have a demo account, let's say in India, it would say Kronos India. And the thing that's particularly important about this little hyperlink is it returns us back to our role center. So if we've gone into a later page, if sometimes you can see the company still listed out there, you can click on it, bring yourself back to this role center. Or if you're already on the role center as we are now, you can click on it and it will refresh the page. So for example, if you feel like the analytical information you see lower down, if that has updated, you can always click on that company page and it's basically like refreshing your browser. So to the right of that, we have several tabs here that, as I said before, this allows us to go deeper into the system, and they're broken up by general category. And the types of categories we have here, again, those are tied to the role that we're in right now. So for example, if I wanted to look into things and tools related to finance, I can click this finance tab and I have a bunch of options here. So I could look at financial reporting, which we will do later in this video. I could take a look at the chart of accounts, etc. I could come over to the sales tab and look at things like a list of all the sales orders or the customers in the system. Now, this is only 5 tabs being displayed here, but if I wanted to see all the available categories of things in the system, I could come over here to all reports, which will open up a larger window on top of what we were just seeing, including all these categories. So we have things here like inventory, purchasing, sales and marketing. We've got manufacturing on the left here. So if we want to dig into some of these other areas we can't natively see, we could go in there, and I can always click on this back button to come back to our role center. So that's the top row here. Now, if we go one row down, these tabs on the bottom here, these are bookmarks. So just like if you have a browser, you can bookmark particular pages or lists so that they're very easily accessible right here on this page. And these ones in particular, I've bookmarked customers, vendors, items, etc., etc. So from here, for example, if I want to look at my vendors list, I could just click on this bookmark and it brings me to a list of all the vendors. Now, I will dive into this page later on in this video, but you understand the basic concept. If I go back and click on my company link, it brings me back to my role center. So that's the bookmark list. I can take bookmarks off. I can add new ones as is necessary. You really want to sort of personalize this to what is best for you in the role that you're in and the responsibilities that you have to make it as efficient and effective as a system for you as possible. Now, moving on from that, we had a large banner here that was introducing us to the demo account, but I closed that. So now we just have some kind of like headline information that comes up on the left side here, but really the important part is on the right. This is a bunch of additional fields that we have here where we can do certain actions. So again, this is something you want to customize for yourself. So if you often find yourself creating new vendors or purchase invoices, things like that, you want to have them here so you don't have to go into the system to create these records. You can click one button and immediately go to one of these new transactions. For example, if I wanted to click a new vendor, I could come under here and generate a new vendor record. Again, later on in the video, I will show you how to create new records, what that looks like. But for now, just understand this entire top section is allowing us to go deeper into the system and quickly perform certain actions. So that's the navigation section, is really the first thing that you see on your role center. Scrolling down from that, lower down here and down to the bottom of the page, we have, again, what I would consider the reporting information part of your role center. So in this case, we have a bunch of different fields here showing us sales information. If we scroll down, we have all these different tiles that relate to certain types of records. So we can see, for example, how many ongoing purchase orders are currently in the system. So this is providing a lot of current information about the system. In addition to that, we can use these tiles to give us access to things that are very critical to our role and our job responsibility. For example, if I was a manager and there was certain purchase orders that had to go through me and get approval before they can be acted upon, I could have a tile here that shows purchase orders requiring approval. So if I saw there was a 2 there, I could, and I'm just going to click on this tile, for example, I could click on that 2, and that would bring me to a list of the purchase orders I need to review and then approve so they can move on. Moving back to our role center. So that would be one example. You can create these tiles and utilize them to very easily see what kinds of things you need to do from your role standpoint. And you can see other examples of that down here. We have my incoming documents. So that's really personal to me. We also, let's say down here, we have tasks failed. Let's say you're, as a business manager, you are responsible for making sure the system's working appropriately. So if there's certain tasks that have failed, you might need to jump on that immediately and try to debug those problems. So this is where you can very rapidly see things that are going to directly relate to your job, and you can dive into them and immediately handle them. There might be incoming leads. That would be something for like a sales rep or a sales manager. I think you get the point. So I can scroll down here, but you get the concept. This is a lot of, again, analytical reporting information, graphs, tiles, etc. So that is the lower section of your role center. And then the third section of your role center is this top black bar. So this black bar has a few things that are incredibly important. Moving over first on the left side, if I click on the app launcher, Now, because this is a trial account, I only have a few apps that are all included in with this account, but generally speaking, you will see a number of different apps here that are all related. They're all in the Microsoft family, and that's one of the major benefits of going with something like Business Central as an ERP is the fact that it's completely integrated in with all the other Microsoft products like Excel, SharePoint, Teams, Outlook email, even things like Power BI. All of these are Microsoft products. So instead of having to create integrations and try to plug these two things in together, they automatically come connected. You really just need to tell the system, this is my Outlook, this should be connected to my Business Central account. And then if you're emailing back and forth with a customer, all of those emails can immediately be attached on to that customer. It's a major, major benefit of dealing with a Microsoft product is that integration element. So closing that down, we're going to move over to the right-hand side of this. Now, the first thing we see here, this is supposed to look, I know it looks a little bit like a chip, but it's supposed to look like a building, almost like a skyscraper building. And what this does is it allows us to easily switch between different subsidiaries, or if you have a multi-entity organization, you can immediately switch between the entities. So if you've got the headquarters or like a holding company, you've got one entity in the USA, another one in Mexico, Denmark, etc. You might want to really quickly be able to switch between those companies. And in this case, we only have one, but you would have them listed out here. You click, it automatically swaps between them. So that's the company selector. Over here, we have the Copilot. So you can click on that and it opens up this pane. This is obviously another major benefit of using something like Microsoft is Copilot's built into it in many different ways. You can use it for reporting and analytical tasks. You can use it to ask questions and debug issues or error messages you come across. I will be making probably several videos really diving into how to best use Copilot, especially as it continues to develop and become more and more helpful as an AI tool. But for the sake of this, we'll just understand this is where you can access that Copilot tool. So closing that, we have the search bar, which is also referred to as the tell me bar. So if I click that, it brings down to this bar and you can see it says, tell me what to do. So this is where you can come in. You can say, instead of having to dive into fields or navigate through a bunch of dropdowns, you can say, I just want to look at a list of our employees. So you can type in employees and it brings us a number of different things related to employees. So this would be a list of them. This could be employees specifically in relation to the warehouse. You get the concept. We could search, we could look at any kind of help menus in relation to employees. You can search really anything that you want in the system using the tell me bar. Closing that. I'm not going to describe every single thing on here. So we've got notifications. I think you get the concept of that. But more importantly, we have the settings tab here. So if I click on settings, it brings up these options. And there's really two in particular I want to make note of. First off, under my settings, if I click on that, it brings us to this page, which is really where we can see the fact that we are in the business manager role and we have the capability to switch roles if you have multiple roles assigned to you. So this is where we can come in. We could select this. Now, because again, this is a trial account, I'm in the business manager role, which is a broad access role. I have a lot of capabilities in the system and I have access to a lot of other roles. So let's take a look at what happens if we change roles. So if I scroll down here, we can see we have a sales and relationship manager role. Notice, pay attention to what's happening on the side and the back here. Look at the kinds of things that are available for the business manager and take note of what kinds of things you see if we switch to the sales and relationship manager. So I'm going to hit OK, and then it's going to load up this new role. And as it does so, you can see at the top here, we now have things like sales, analysis, administration, and sales. You can see all of these different tiles are now all tailored to sales. So we've got things like contacts, open opportunities, etc. So if we go back up to the settings, I'm going to switch back to our business manager role. I'll click here. And we'll scroll up here and I've got my business manager eval. We've got some other basic information here. You can set the date, what company you're in, you can set the time zone, etc. In most cases, you will not have to influence these things. So I'll hit OK. It'll reload my business manager role. And the other thing I wanted to discuss over here under the settings tab was the personalize option. Now, this is a really cool feature. You can do this not just here on your role center, you can really do this anywhere in the system. And by clicking on that, it brings us into personalization mode. You can tell by this kind of light gray bar on the top here, and the fact you've got a little red dot on the side. This allows us now to really easily personalize and, in my opinion, what I would call customize the fields that we see here and the organization of things. So because we're on the role center, we can look at, let's say in this top bar, let's say I want to move purchasing over and I want it to be on the other side of Shopify. I can easily do that. I could take out purchasing. I could add something else there. I can close this. And let's say I don't want sales orders to be listed here, or let's say sales quotes. I can click on that and say, I don't want to see it. I could add a new field in here by coming up and clicking plus field. I could move any of these tiles around. I could reconfigure the entire sections. It really gives a lot of very simple drag and drop capability to, again, not just this page, but whatever page you're in Business Central. So it's a very easy, handy way of personalizing things. And if you've ever had to deal with some of the competing ERP systems, they're much less flexible in the way that you can personalize things by user. So once you have finished personalizing things and you're satisfied with it, you could come up here and hit clear personalization, which I am going to do. I'll click all. So if you've done something you're not particularly happy with, you can revert back to what it was before. And if you're complete, you can hit done. So it brings you back to your standard role center. And the last thing I want to point out here is the button over here, Account Manager. This allows us to see what thing we are logged in with. In other words, what email address, what account from Microsoft's standpoint. And if you need to log out, switch accounts, etc., you have the capability to do so from here. All right, now before I continue in the system, I do want to point out if you'd like some more information on Business Central, I do have a free basics course for the software. You can get that, a link down below, as well as I will have a link up above. You can access that. It has about 6 lessons where I go much deeper into the things that I'm describing here. I flesh them out more. I take more time to show you how these things work. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. And if you're interested in a much deeper dive into Business Central, I will be rolling out a number of courses, really taking up each different aspect of it. Everything from inventory to manufacturing and sales. I will be fleshing out a whole curriculum of courses all related to Business Central. And if you're looking at making a career out of Business Central and are looking to get your qualifications and credentials, I will have prep courses on each one of the certifications. In other words, how to prepare for the exam. So instead of going through what can take 80 hours going through Microsoft's normal tutorial route, I will have courses that are really only a few hours long and effectively prepare you to take and pass those certification exams. So if you're interested in any of that, by all means, check out the link below. And with that in mind, let's get back into the system. All right, so we're back here on our role center. We now understand what we see here and what our capabilities are from this page, but we want to dive deeper into the system. Now, this can be a little bit of a learning curve for new users because as you start to wander into the system, it can be disorienting and you don't understand exactly what you're interacting with. So I feel it's important to understand the structure of the system and what you should expect as you start moving deeper into it. And the first thing to understand when you look at the hierarchy of the system is to understand if you're looking, you're going to start diving into records. The first thing you're going to come across is a list view. So if you want to take a look at sales, you're going to come across a list of sales. If you want to look at customers, you're going to come across a list of customers. So let's take a look at that right now. For example, over here on our bookmarks, we have customers. Let's pull up our customers. If I click on that, it brings us to this list view. And again, we are in this case looking at customers, but it's going to look identical to this no matter what type of record we're looking at. This is our standard list view. And just to break it down by piece, first off, this main section here on the bottom left is where we see the actual customers themselves or whatever it is that we're looking at. So you can see in this case, we have 5 customers, which is very rare. Usually you would have at least a few dozen, if not hundreds or thousands of customers. but whatever, this is a demo account. We can see the unique identifier for each customer. So this one is 10,000, 20,000, etc. The name. We've got a few other pieces of key information. We've got the phone number, our contact with that company. We can see the credit limit for them. We can see the balance, the amount due, etc. So a lot of key information right here in this list view. Again, all of this can be personalized. We can add additional columns, take ones out that we don't need, etc. But the next major part of this list view is over to the right. We have this window pane over here is referred to as the fact box. So regardless of whether it's for a vendor, items, etc., you're always going to have a fact box on the right here, unless you minimize it. And what it's doing is it's providing you with critical information, a summary of information about whatever you're clicking on. So let's click on tray research. You can see it updates basically to give us all these tiles showing us what are the various records we have related to tray research. So if I scroll down here, I can see some basic statistics like the balance. Again, I don't have to like scroll over on the list view. I could just come right over to the fact box and I could see things like the total sales this customer has had with us, how much has been shipped but not invoiced yet. It gives us a lot of key information at a glance, depending on what we've clicked here. The next major section of the list view is this row right here in the middle. This row has a lot of important things. I'm not going to describe all of them. I will discuss it more in my basics course, but for now, let's just touch on some of the key points. First off, we can do a filter view. And now in this case, there's only 5 customers, so there's really no need to provide a filter. But if we had hundreds or thousands of customers, we might want to apply a filter showing us only those customers that have purchased more than $30,000 with our company, or split off by geographic zone, etc. So we can easily come in here, provide a filter format. An additional thing we have though is the analysis view or analysis mode. What this allows us to do is not just filter the information, but to create entirely new viewpoints of this list. So if we want to create an analysis that's showing us which customers provide us the best profit margins, or which ones have overdue invoices over 30 days within a particular geographic location, we can create whatever analysis we want. We can create several of them and save them in the system. And that way, you can come to just a generic list of your customers or whatever it is you're looking at, and then quickly switch over to your analysis views to provide a lot of new insights into that information. And you do so by going to this Enter Analysis Mode icon. Moving over from that, this is a lot of different tabs that, again, they either allow us to navigate to something related to customers, or they allow us to do certain actions related to customers. For example, if we wanted to create a new customer, we would come here and we would click New. We could also delete customer records, although deleting records in any ERP system is never particularly advised. So just keep that in mind. It's generally better to not include them or to inactivate certain types of records, but you do have that as an option here. Moving on from that, again, if you wanted to create a new sales order connected to a particular customer, you could click on New Document. You could get a bunch of information about whatever customer record you are currently clicked on. A lot of different options here. But moving over to the right, we have a few additional things. First off, you can export this either to a particular person or to another app, such as Excel, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But you have that as an option. You also have the ability to change how you view this information. So in this case, we're looking at a list view, which is generally the most commonly used view. But if you were looking at a list of employees or maybe items and you wanted to see what types of items they were, you could switch over to tiles and include pictures. So you could very easily see kind of who you're looking at and what are these different things. Again, for customers, generally not the case. You'd want to stay with a list view. And lastly, this bookmark tab. If you remember when we were on our role center, we had those bookmarked options like customers and vendors. This is how we would include those. So in this case, because it is customers, it's already bookmarked. I could click this and unbookmark them, select other ones, etc. So I will leave this bookmarked because that is a useful option. The next thing I want to show you, so we understand this is a list view, and I can even show, if we switch back to our role center, and this time, instead of going to customers, let's go to vendors. it brings us to an identical looking page. So list views are going to be the same regardless of what list view you're on. They all have a certain look to them. So now you understand, as you start venturing further into the system, you can anticipate that you're going to come across a list view and what that's going to look like, what are the various features that are in there. So suddenly another layer of the system is clarified. Now, going deeper than that, we go to the individual records themselves. And one thing I think is important to be aware of is the terminology that gets used in Business Central when we're dealing with different types of records. So in this particular case, we are on vendor records. So if we wanted to open up a vendor record, whether it was a vendor, a customer, partner, employee, any type of entity, or an item, a fixed asset record, really anything that can be considered master data. These records, when you go to them on an individual basis, they're referred to as cards. So let's open up a particular vendor record. We have Fabricam here. If I click on this hyperlink, it's going to bring us to the vendor card for Fabricam. And you can actually see that up here. You can see vendor card right up here. You can see Fabricam's listed out. And this is what a vendor record, or really any kind of card, will generally look like. Now, depending on if you're on a customer or an employee, the fields that you see lower down, they're going to be unique and customized to that particular type of record. But the general layout will be almost identical from card to card. So in this particular case, for this vendor, you can see we have things like the name, we can see the balance that we have with that vendor. We can come in here, we can see the address, etc. Now in this particular case, I am in an edit mode, so I can easily come in here and start changing the information. If I wanted to lock things off, I could come up here to this pencil and I could go into read-only mode, which would lock things off. It would make it so I don't have an accidental changing of something on one of these master records. But let's switch it over back into edit mode just so I can show you how easily this is done. I can come in here. Let's say this phone number is actually going to be different. We're going to switch it to a different phone number. Now, take note, I can type something in, and then if you look over on the top right here, you can see this record is currently saved. As soon as I click off of that phone number, this is going to change to saving, and then it immediately is saved again. So you can come in here, you can very easily start adding information, changing it. If it's a customer thing, you can go in, add new credit limits, change the balance, change the contract terms with that customer, and it's automatically updating. So as soon as somebody else goes to that record, they're immediately seeing all the changes that you just executed. It's very, very quick to make these kind of edits in a system. Whereas some of the other ERP systems, you have to go in, you have to then go into edit mode, make changes, propose to the system that you want to save that. Generally, there's a bit of a load time. With Business Central, they tend to be much faster with these quick handling of records, whether they're master records or the transaction records. So let's talk about transaction records for a second. I've already clarified that when we're dealing with these master records, they're referred to as cards, but when you're dealing with transactional records, they're going to be referred to as documents. So if it's a sales order or a quote or a purchase invoice, a payment, etc., these are all documents in the system. That's what they're referred to as. So let's open up a new document and just see the types of things that we would find on there. Because again, this type of card, you have fields on the middle and left, and then you have a fact box on the right where you can see some basic information about this card. If we go to a document record, and we can do that from here, if we come up to new document, I can actually create a purchase order straight off of this vendor. So I can come down to purchase order. If I click on that, it will open up a new window. And by the way, this is another point I should make here. You might not have noticed, but see these gray tabs on the left here? Just like with anything in Microsoft, you're adding new windows on top of other windows. So we're not actually on a new page. We've simply put another window on top of the vendor record that we were just looking at. And if we went back from that, we would come back to that vendor list. And then our role center is under all of those. So we could actually click over here and try to get right back down to our role center. But in this particular case, we wanted to come here. We are now on a purchase order document. So again, any kind of transactional records, they will be referred to as documents, and they will again have a certain look to them. They look in some ways similar to cards, like a vendor card, but there's a key difference. Not only do we have these fields below, but we also have the line option. And this is really what makes transactions unique, is that we can come in here, and in this case, we're making a purchase order. So let's say we want to order a bunch of things from Fabricam. I can come in here and I can select item. I want to choose, let's say, this Paris chair. So I'm going to select that chair. It automatically will fill in information. Keep in mind, this is a relational database. So as soon as we start linking these things together, it can go, okay, you want the Paris chair. I have that as a master record somewhere else. Suddenly I can pull in all that information from the item record and populate it right here on this transaction. And it does so automatically. So I've filled in that chair. And if I scroll over here, I can specify, I want 3 of these chairs. So I can click on that. And as soon as we do that, notice these fields below, such as the subtotal excluding tax or the total including tax, all of these things automatically fill in as I'm putting in line by line. So I can come in here, I can add an additional line, and I'll scroll back over. I'm going to specify that I want, in this case, I'd like to do the Rome guest chair. And again, quantity, I'm going to put in 2, and notice what happens below here with these figures. As soon as I put in that 2 and click off of it, it's going to add them all immediately into the total for this purchase order. So right there, we can fill them in. This is the general format for these types of documents. You can put as many lines as you want, and you always have that fact box on the right, providing some basic information, in this case about the vendor that we're putting in the purchase order for. Now, with any transactional record, any document, we also have a number of different features at the top here. So we can influence this record in different ways. We can look at other information in relation to it. In this particular case, I'm actually happy with what we've put here. I want to now submit this order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to post, and I'm going to click on it. It's going to give us this pop-up saying, okay, well, you want to post this record, which is fine. We're going to create this purchase order, but what are you going to do as the later steps? What do you want to do as the next thing? And if you're familiar with either the order to cash or the procure to pay process flows, you should be familiar with the concept that the generic flow is, at least when you're dealing with procure to pay, it starts with a purchase order. You then have the item receipt, then an invoice, and then finally payment. In other words, we've said that we want something and we've promised that we want to pay for that thing. We then receive that thing. We then get told that we need to pay for that thing, which is the invoice. And that's something we can receive a bill from the vendor, but we can also generate our own purchase invoice. And then finally, we pay for the goods that we received. So in this case, what we're going to do here is once we click this, we're not only going to create that purchase order document in the system, but we're also going to generate, first off, we can generate either just the receipt, meaning we can say that we've received these chairs, or we can generate the invoice saying, okay, we haven't received the chairs yet, but we want to specify in the system that we do need to pay for these things. Or we can generate both, receive and invoice. So in this particular case, I want to go with receive. So we'll click on that and I'll hit OK. And you can see it immediately post those transactions. So it actually just created 2 transactions. It created the purchase order and it created the item receipt both at the same time. And you can see it now changed the status from open to released, indicating that it is now locked into the system. We could reopen this transaction, but it would now be accessible if we wanted to come back to this transaction. All right, so we've talked about a lot of different things in Business Central so far. I want to cover one more key aspect of the software before we jump out. And to do so, I want to go back to our role center. I want to come back to home base. So I'm going to show you, if you hover over on the left here, as I pointed out, you've got these gray bars. If I start clicking on them, it's going to start closing those windows and returning us to that base page that we were on, which in this case is the list view. And then from here, I can come back up to the company and return to our role center. So from here, I now want to show you an additional aspect of the system, which is the reporting tools you have available to you. Now, I've already shown you a number of different tools. For example, just here on our role center, we have all of these different tiles and statistical information laid out right here. Also, as I showed you with the list views, those are our reporting tools in their own right. But we have a few additional ones that I want to show you. So if I come up here to finance, I want to come down here to financial reporting. This is going to bring us to a list of all the primary financial statements that we have available in the system. So for example, a balance sheet is a very commonly used financial report. So I can click on this balance sheet detailed, and if I do so, it brings us to a balance sheet. Now, this doesn't look like a balance sheet because the first thing that we see is some basic parameters that we can influence in relation to what we're going to see in our report. So in this particular case, I'm actually fine with this. We could put in a date filter, influence how negatives are being shown, but I'm okay with all of that. So I'm actually going to come up here and I'm going to say hide options. And that actually pulls up our actual balance sheet. So we can see we've got all our main balance sheet categories. We can see it's broken down, in this case, by month. We don't have to do it by month. We could influence this thing however we want. So this is a critical element. We can use these reports in the system very easily. We can also export these things by coming over here, and we could export them to Excel. If you want to influence reports and you prefer to work in Excel, you could easily do that and just immediately update the information from Excel back into Business Central. You could also print from Excel if you want to have those reports go out to middle management, etc. You could easily do it from there. And another critical thing you have as a tool is Power BI. Power BI is a very, very powerful reporting and analytics tool that Microsoft has developed and is something, again, you can easily integrate it in with your Business Central, and most companies do. So that should give you a basic concept of some of the reporting tools and capabilities that you have available to you in Business Central. All right, so that's your rapid look at Business Central. Again, I do have a free basics course that does a more deep and a more methodical dive into the system. So if you want to take advantage of that, there's a link below. And in that basics course, I also show you how to gain access to a 30-day free trial account of Business Central. It's particularly notable the fact that Business Central gives you access to a trial account. Most other ERPs, if you're looking at Acumatica or Sage or NetSuite, they don't give you access to a demo account for free. They do that intentionally because they know the software is not always easy to navigate through. And so they like to kind of paywall or guard it behind either the companies themselves or official partners. But when it comes to Business Central, it's free to access. It's very easy. You just need a work email to get, within 15 minutes, get your own trial account. I highly recommend you take advantage of that and play around with the system, interact with it yourself, and see how you feel using it. My overall analysis when it comes to Business Central is there's a lot of plus points. Strictly, there is the fact that it is a pretty user-friendly interface. It's something that you can dive into relatively quickly and get a feel for how to use the system. A lot of other ERPs in the same echelon are not nearly as accessible. So that is a major plus point for it. Again, it is intended for small businesses. So the problem is, as soon as you are starting to scale up, you're going to find limitations, restrictions, things that Business Central is just not flexible enough to deal with. And that's where you're going to want to go on to an alternative product. Now, moving on from Microsoft, if you were starting with Business Central, you can move on to something like, they have all these other modules that you can basically plug in. So if you want to use the finance module, you can use the supply chain management module, a lot of other things that are much better at scaling with a very large organization, especially if you have a huge amount of transactions. These other modules are much more capable to scale with you as an organization, although they're not nearly as beginner friendly if you have a small organization. So that is something you should be aware of. When it comes to Business Central, it has its strengths. You just need to be aware of the fact that its scalability is not fully there. But again, as I've said before, one of the big benefits of dealing with whether Business Central or any other one of the Microsoft ERP products is the fact that it's all integrated in the Microsoft world. So all of these things, Excel, Teams, Outlook, Power BI, all of these things really work well together, and it is a major plus point for the product. So overall, I hope this video was helpful for you. I will have not only this YouTube video, but you should subscribe because I'm going to have a lot of videos coming out on the subject of Business Central. I'll be releasing a new one every single week. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to take advantage of those courses on my website, I have all the courses listed out. You'll see whichever ones I've currently released, and you can take advantage of those. And I will be coming out with new courses very regularly. So with all that, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to see you in the next video.